This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I want to have a special Seder Halimud. I want to learn the Parsha of Haketores, following the recommendation of Rabbi Glatstein. Rabbi Glatstein writes in a letter in the Igor Seifrim, Simon Chavtes, that one of the recommendations in the time of Magefa is to say the Parsha of Haketores, but even greater than saying the Parsha of Haketores is learning the Parsha of Haketores. Kal haloi made ki'ilu hikriv. So perhaps in the zchus of our learning, it should be a protection for us, for all of Klal Yisrael, for all of our communities, for our families. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over us, be making us, protect us, send refuos, the yeshuos for all the families who need it. Also, we want to dedicate today's learning to an Isha HaChashuva who is Niftaras on Purim, Elka Gittel Bas Yisrael Mordechai, the mother of my dear friend, Rabbi Aryeh Peretz Kraut, a Tayyar Yid, a tzaddik of a Yid, and his brother, Tzvi Michal Kraut, who are sitting Shiva. They just got up from Shiva. But Nebuch, in our community, our shuls are closed. They're not able to say Kaddish. So the learning of the Parsha Haketores should be Iloi Neshama to El Gogito Bas Yisrael Mordechai, Sheven Aliyah, Began Eden to Heven Uchasa. So we're learning Parshas Kisisa, Parak Lamed, Pasuk Lamed Daled. Vayemer Hashem el Moshe. The Rebbeinu Shalom says to Moshe, Kach lecha samim. Take for yourself spices. Now, when it says spices, minimum spices we usually say is 2, but they are undisclosed. Nataf, and now for the first time the Pasuk describes what is the identity of the first spice, the stakti, ushcheles. Shcheles is usually translated as Anaka. The chelbana, galbanam. Interesting, chelbana actually has a very foul smell. And interestingly, the gematria of chelbana is 95, the same as Haman. Samim, also, spices, undisclosed amount. One would have thought it's 2, but as we're going to see, the word samim here actually refers to another 5 spices. Levaina, zaka, and pure frankincense. Bad, bevad, yiyu. They should all be of equal measure. Now, a very interesting thing. Even though Chazal tell us there are 11 ingredients of the Haketores, only 4 of them are mentioned by name, and they are shecheles, levaina, chelbana, and nataf. Amazingly, the Gra says, and as well as Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac, Rabbi Tzvi Hersha of Zidichav, they both teach us that the remez of the 4 ingredients of Haketores, which are enumerated in the pasuk, spell out the word shulchan, which indicates that our table is like a mizbeach. This is the remez, shulchanai shel adam is like a mizbeach. According to this remez, then, that when we say our table is like a mizbeach, it comes out our table is like a mizbeach Haketores. This seems a little bit to contradict that which we know the Ramah tells us, that on every table we should have salt, because I'll call karbancha takriv melach. Now, the reason we have salt on a table is because every carbon requires salt. Which kind of carbon? What kind of carbon requires salt? The carbonates that are brought on the Mizbeach HaChitzayin. That seems to indicate our table is like a Mizbeach HaChitzayin. So it's somewhat of a contradiction. What kind of table is our table? What kind of Mizbeach is our table? Is our Mizbeach like is our table like a Mizbeach HaKetores, indicated by Shcheles, Chelbana, Nataf, Levaina? Or is our table the Mizbeach HaChitzayin? And the Ben Ish Chai writes, our table is like both Mizbeachos, and therefore he says that every table we should try to say Parsha Haketores and say Divrei Torah. This way we are accomplishing really both aspects by saying Divrei Torah and saying the Parsha of Haketores. That's in lieu of the Hakravas Haketores, as well as feeding Aniyim at our table. That is in lieu of the Mizbeach HaChitzayin. So actually our table, Shulchanoi Shel Adam, encompasses both kinds of Mizbeachos. In fact, Rabbeinu Bechaye brings in Parshas Truma that in France, in Provence, the custom was that they would ask to be buried with the boards of the table of their home, because they realized that after 120, all a person could take with them are the Maisim Tovim that a person did at their Shulchan. In fact, the Rabbeinu Bechaye says that the Shulchan of the Mishkan was constructed of Ansei Shitim to teach that a person's table brings Shitim, Shalom, Toiva, Yeshua, and Mechila. So let's read Rashi on this pasuk. Nataf. Says the Hiliga Rashi, what is Nataf? Stakti, Hutsari. That is sorry. Val she'enu elo sraf. Hanoitev me'atzek taf, because it's nothing more than the sap that drips from the balsam trees. Karei nataf. It's called a dripping. Nataf means a dripping. Uvelaz guma. That's a kind of sap. V'hatzori karen loy triaka. Ushecheles. What's shecheles? Shecheles is shoresh boisam chalak umatzar ketziparin. It's an aromatic root that is smooth and is shiny like a fingernail. Uvelashon HaMishnah karei tziparin. In Hebrew, it's called tziparin. So that means in the language of the Mishnah, it's called tziparin. In the language of the pasuk, it's called shecheles. In the language of the Mishnah, it's called tziparin. V'zeh shetergem unklis v'tufra. That's why unklis translates it as tufra. Tufra means a fingernail. V'chelbana. What is chelbana? Boisam shrei chara. That's a spice whose smell is foul. V'karan lai galbana. Umana akasav bein samimane Haketores. And nevertheless, it is enumerated among the ingredients of the Haketores. Lelamdenu, it's to teach us shalayeka be'einenu letzarif imanu ba'agudas tani yosenu, that it should not be light in our eyes to join up in our gathering of fasting utfilasenu and prayers as Parsha Yisrael, the sinners of Israel. Sheyu nimnin imanu, so that they should be counted among us. Meaning, from here we learn that when we get together to pray, we should always join together not only the tzaddikim but the risham as well. The Gemara says, "Kol tainas she'eni imanu mi Parsha Yisrael einoi tainas." This is learned out from the fact that despite the fact that the chelbana is a foul-smelling item, we join it together with the other spices. In fact, it is said that the word tzibur consists of 3 letters: tzadi beis reish, tzadikim beinonim, and rishaim. The reason for that, the reason why we need all the Parsha Yisrael, is because if we only have tzadikim and beinonim, then the way we look at this gathering is, it's a gathering of individuals. But when we have equal representation of the entire gamut of the Jewish people, then we have a new entity called tzibur. And there's a concept that the entity of Klal Yisrael is untouchable, is beyond analysis. The Rebbeinu Shalom will not see any fault with the entity of the Jewish people. But once we're individuals, no individual is considered beyond reproach. Samim, Rashi says, means achirim, others. Ulavoina zaka, says Rashi, Mikan lamdu Rabbi Seinu, from here our rabbis have learned, Achad asar samamanum nemru loy Moshe misinai, that Hashem told Moshe on Har Sinai that there are 11 ingredients of the Haketores. Why? Because the pasuk starts with the word samim. As we said, the minimum of Lashon Rabim is 2. Samim is 2. Nataf would then be a 3rd. Shecheles, a 4th. Chelbana, a 5th. Miyut, samim, shnaim. The minimum of the word samim is 2. Nataf, shecheles, and chelbana is another 3. Harei chamisha, that's 5. And then it says samim again. The next repetition of the word samim indicates an equal amount of what we had until now. Samim l'rabbis oid k'ma elo, to include another 5. Harei asar, that's a total of 10. Ulavaina, when we say lavaina, harei achad asar, that's 11. The Elohein, here they are. Tsari, which we said is nataf. Tsari, which is balsam, is nataf. The hatzipoiren, the fingernail, that's shecheles. Chelbana, lavaina, moyer, myrrh, ukitsia, cassia, shiboiles, spikenard, nerd v'charkaim, and crocus. Harei shmoina, that's 8. Why? Because shiboiles and nerd are 1. Spike and nard is 1. So in other words, it's sari is 1, siparin is 2, chelbana 3, levina 4, mar 5, k'tzia 6, shiboiles nerd is 7, and charkaim. Why? Shehanerd doime l'shiboiles. Nerd and shiboiles are very similar. Nard and spike are similar grains. Hakoisht, castus, v'hakilufa, which is some kind of bark that has good aroma, v'kinamen, and cinnamon. Harei achad asar. Now, there's something called boiris karshina. Boiris karshina, einoi nectar. It's not burnt on the mizbeach. So what do you do with boiris karshina soap? Ela by shafinas it's burned. They rub the fingernail, the anika, lelabna, to whiten it, shetehina, that should be pleasing. Now, what does it mean, bad bevadia? What does it mean they should be equal to one another? Says the Rashi, Elu arba haneskarim kan, the four ingredients mentioned here, shcheles, chelbana, levina, and nataf, yushavin mishkal b'mishkal should be equal in weight. Kimishkalei shalzeh, like the weight of one, kach mishkalei shalzeh, so too should be the weight of the other. V'chein shaninu, likewise we learned in a braysa, hatzari, v'hatzipoiren, hachelbana, v'halavina. So in other words, shecheles and the tzipoiren, which we said is shecheles, hatzari is what the pasuk says, nataf. So in other words, the nataf, the shecheles, the chelban levina, mishkal shivim mana. They are 70 mana in weight. The lashon bad, the language of the word bad, meaning the word bad means ner be'enai shu lashon yachid. Says Rashi, in my opinion, the word bad is lashon yachid, meaning echad be'echadiyah. They should be 1 to 1, meaning an equal ratio. Zeh kamay zeh. This one like that one. Says the next pasuk. Ve'asisa oisa Haketores. You should make it into incense. Roikach ma'aseh roikeach. The work of a blender of spices. Memulach, mixed well. Tahar kodesh, pure and holy. Says Rashi, memulach, thoroughly mixed. Ketargumai me'arav. It means mixed. Uncle says ma'arav. She'yarev shechikasan yafe yafe zem zeh. They should, the grinding should be mixed very well one with the other. Says Rashi, a very interesting thing. We know that malachim mem lamed ches yud mem are sailors, rowers. Says Rashi, in my opinion, this is a similar word to this is a pasuk in Yaina vayiru hamalachim. The rowers, the sailors were afraid. Or melachayich v'chayvlayich, your rowers and sailors. Why is a rower called memulach, malachim? Al shem shemahapchim. Because they churn, they turn over, as hamayim b'meshaytes, they turn over the water with oars. Kishamanhigim esasfina, when they guide and propel the ship. Ka'adam ha'mahapech b'chaf beitzim trufa, it's like someone who turns over eggs which are beaten with a spoon, la'arvin and mamayim, to mix them with the water. V'chol davar sha'adam roitzel arev yafeh yafeh. Anything a person wants to mix very well, mahapchoi be'etzva, he mixes with his finger, oy bevazach, or with a spoon. Memulach tahar kodesh, thoroughly mixed, pure and holy. Memulach yeh, meaning it should be mixed. V'tar yeh should be pure. V'kadosh yeh, and it should be holy. Okay. Next pasuk. V'shachakta mimeno hadek, you should grind of it very finely. V'nasata mimeno fnei ha'edus, and place from it before the testimony, ba'ayamait, and the tent of meeting, asher yivoid l'cha shama, where I will establish a meeting time for you. Kodesh kadashim tiyulachem, it should be holy of holies. Says Rashi, v'nasata mimena v'chulu, he ketores shabachol yom v'yom, this refers to the daily offering of ketores, she'al mizbeach ha'pnimi, which, as we said earlier, was done on the inner mizbeach, shehu ba'ayamait. Asher ivoid l'cha shama, where I should fix meeting times for you. Kol mayadei dibor she'ekva l'cha, any meetings for the purpose of speaking that I make with you, ani koivim loisamakam, I send in that place. Pasuk lamed zayin, v'haketores asher ta'asa, and the ketores that is made b'mas kunta, in its measure, loisasu lachem, you should not make for yourselves. Kodesh tiyeh l'cha l'Hashem, it should be holy to you, to Hashem. What does that mean? It should be holy to you, to Hashem. Says Rashi, b'maskunta, b'minyan samoneh, in the quantity of its spices. Meaning, as opposed to the Isser of duplicating the Shemen HaMishcha, the Isser of duplicating the Haketores also applies to mimicking the proportions of the ingredient, even if the quantity is different. Meaning the Isser of duplicating the Haketores is more strict than duplicating the Shemen HaMishcha. But the Isser of duplicating the Haketores is even if you duplicate the proportion, even if it's a different amount. Kodesh tiyeh l'cha l'Hashem, it should be holy for you to Hashem. Shalei ta'asena ela l'shmi, you should only make it for my sake. So we already said in the previous pasuk that the Haketores is Kodesh Kadashim. This pasuk says that not only is it Kodesh Kadashim, it should be made l'shma, for the sake of no one but Hashem. Pasuk Lamed Ches. Ish asher yasech mayo. Anyone who makes anything like it, lahariachba, to smell v'nichras meyama v'schayev kares. Says Rashi, lahariachba, aval oisa ata b'maskunta, you could make this measure, mishalcha, of your own property, k'dei lamasor l'tzibor, in order to give it to the tzibor. Being the Torah asks you to make it, to smell it, even if you don't actually smell it. But you are allowed to make it for the use of the Mishkan, or the temple. So may our learning of the Parsha Haketores be nechshav ne'akadosh baruch hu ki'ilu hakrabno Haketores, and the Rebbe Shem should use our limud Haketores la'atzar hamagefa lahagen ba'adenu shmar tzeisenu uvayenu l'chayim u'lashaloi me'ata v'yad olam.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.